Hello, Grandmasters. Mike from the WCA. I'm very impressed with you so far. I really like what I see in class. Just the behavior, the effort, the games, everything going really, really well. Take a look at the following game. This is a wonderful example of the importance of calculation, and also it's just an entertaining game. A lot of chess coaches show this. I have been showing a lot of games from you folks in class, but I'm taking a little break this week. I want to share this one with you to work on calculation, which is something that all of us always need to work on. It's so, so important. So Lasker has white. Now, this is Edward Lasker, and the more you play chess, you're going to hear the name Emanuel Lasker, who was world champion. I think he held it for 27 years, and that may be the record. This game was played in 1912 by Edward Lasker, who was a very strong player, but not quite the same as Emanuel Lasker. And he's playing a casual game with George Thomas. And a casual game meant, probably not in a tournament setting. And they were kind of popular back then. They would just get together and play, and it turns out some of them are wonderful teaching games. The best example of that is the famous Paul Morphy Duke of Brunswick game. Take a look at this. Anyway, Lasker with white begins with d4, and black plays e6. So if white wanted to, they could turn this game into the French defense by playing what move? That's right, d4. Now, if you open your game with e4 and black plays the French, and it's a good idea that you guys start learning the names of these openings, the most common response to any time a player with black only moves a pawn one box, because that's what you're doing in the French. You're only moving the pawn one. Most of us are used to seeing this pawn on e5. Well, here on e6, the most common response is to take the whole center. That's with d4, and then black usually just strikes in the middle. That's the whole point, is to eventually make the center equal for both players. Okay, if you begin with e4 and black plays c6, do you know the name? This is the Caro-Kann, and that is followed with d4 and d5. Okay, now, in our game, d4 was played, and black is inviting white to turn this into a king pawn opening by playing the move e4. It turns out that black was interested in playing something called the Dutch defense. Now, don't let all these names confuse you, but it is a good idea to start learning them, because you're going to hear it just come out of a chess player's mouth. Oh, yeah, I played in this tournament, and so played the Dutch or the French or the Caro-Kann. And, once you learn the names of the openings, it makes it easier to follow the conversation. Okay. What black is intending here is after d4, they want to play the move f5, and this is really called the Dutch defense. And the reason he's not doing it right away is sometimes in the Dutch, if you play f5 on move 1, you see how you're controlling e4? That's the good point of putting this pawn on f5. You're controlling a central square, but it really has a negative side in that you're moving a side pawn that doesn't help you develop a minor piece. Now think when you move a center pawn. You see what white did on move 1? Can you see the minor piece that can come out now? It's the dark squared bishop down here on c1. When you play the Dutch, you're using your f-pawn to control e4, which is very, very good. The problem is it weakens this diagonal, and at the same time does not allow you to bring a minor piece out. So with the black pieces, it's a little bit risky to play. The Dutch is perfectly playable, but if you do play this kind of defense, keep in mind you need to get those pieces out very quickly. So sometimes after f5, you'll see white play outrageous moves. Things like g4 have been played, h4 have been played. All these wild pawn moves on the side that kind of try to punish black for moving a pawn here. So what white wants to do is use their extra tempo to really blow the board open. Now what Thomas did by playing e6 on move 1 is he's waiting for white to play a move And then if he likes the second move, he'll turn it into a Dutch. So on the move knight f3, this is the game continuation. Here Thomas said, okay, I'm not really afraid of one of these wild openings, so I'll just put my pawn on f5, and now we have a Dutch defense. And again, take a look at the central square. This is the positive of putting the pawn on f5. Keep in mind the negatives, especially this diagonal that I'm toggling with the mouse. Okay, knight c3 was played with a very specific purpose in mind, and I want you to pay attention to this. Knight c3 is a move designed to help white break the center with e4. And it's a pattern that comes up over and over again. And it's one of the points I want you to follow in this game. You see how the knight over here to the left of the pawn helps push it to the middle? Well, this knight here on the right of the d pawn is often used to help this pawn push in the middle. And I'm going to show you perhaps the best example of that, which comes out of the Sicilian defense. Let's go back to move 1. Here we go. Pawn c5. This is the Sicilian. What white loves to do here is play this move to d4, and this is playable. You could play d4 right away, but you would have to be willing to give away a pawn if you did that, because if black takes it, most common here is to sacrifice a pawn and try to play from this position, because if you take with your queen here, then you're just going to get hit with knight c6 or something like that, and you're going to lose a tempo. Your queen is just going to have to run away. So what white wants to do in the Sicilian, e4, c5, is they want to play d4, but they want to take back with a knight. So what do they do here? Knight f3. Notice that the knight to the right of this pawn will help it push to the middle. Black might play a move like d6, and voila, the knight supports the central break. If they take, you take with the knight, and you've managed to open the game up. And this is known as an open Sicilian. Now let's go back to our game with Thomas and Lasker, and I'll show you exactly how it connects to that Sicilian. Not the same moves, the same idea. So d4, e6. Aren't you guys amazed by now at how fast I can set up these pieces? I mean, I'm really working hard over here. I don't get enough credit. I mean, snap, they're right back where they started. Knight f3, and here's our Dutch defense. What is the move that Lasker wants to play? He wants to play e4. So what does he do? He prepares it. He plays knight to c3. Now black knows what white wants to do. There are two main ways to give white a hard time playing e4. So what does white want to do? They want to push a pawn to e4. Let's stop him. Well, we can make it uncomfortable by playing the move d5. Now I'm going to turn the board upside down. This takes me a little bit of time because I have to lift the board and make sure the pieces don't fall. So there we go. Wow. Anyway, this is what the position looks like after d5. This name is the Stonewall defense. And it's called the Stonewall because these pawns here, especially if black follows up with c6, it's one of those weird times in chess where it looks like black is playing checkers. You know, they just have all these pawns in these squares, and it almost looks like a beginner's opening, but it's really not. The Stonewall is designed to really slow down white from pushing in the middle because you have this beautiful control with the pawns. That's the good news. So again, you see how that e4 square is really supported by those black pawns? Well, that's not for free. Black gave something away. They gave away the e5 square because they pushed the f pawn 2 boxes, they pushed the queen pawn 2 boxes. That means the square in the middle is permanently weak. What kind of a square is that? That's right, an outpost square. Okay, so it's not for free. So let's turn the board around and show you what happened in the game. After knight c3, black said, I don't want to play a stonewall. I don't want to give away that e5 square, so I'm going to develop a piece and fight for e4. So what did he do? And again, at any time, stop your video. He played knight f6 because that controls the d5 square, right? Okay. White doesn't like this knight because it's controlling the square they want to attack. So what does white do? They develop a piece and fight for e4. How do you do that? I hope you found the move bishop to g5. And this is an idea I always like to talk about when a dark squared bishop is fighting for a light square, because the bishop is pinning the knight to the queen. Now black is a good player, knows that they're a tempo behind white in the opening, so they cover up with bishop to e7, protecting the knight and getting the king ready to castle, one of the things we do in the opening. Okay, white gives the bishop up for the knight in order to play the move e4. Okay, he accomplished what he wanted. Black really doesn't want white to take this pawn and open up the king, so he takes first. White takes back, and here we have a couple of choices. In the game, black chose the move pawn to b6, which is not bad at all. The only thing with this variation that you have to be careful is white now takes an opportunity to break a rule. And the rule is don't move the same minor piece twice in the opening unless you have a good reason. Here, white has a good reason. He played knight to e5. And by putting the knight on e5, he's setting a little bit of a trap. You'll notice if I back it up, you see Big Mama down here. She's just dying to get to this square here and give a check, which will either make the king move or it will force black to push a pawn in the area where his king is going to castle. That's going to make a few holes. That's exactly what white wants. More common in this position, white very often will play c3, making his pawn in the center very solid. They'll play bishop to d3, developing, getting ready to castle. And by the way, if bishop c4 comes, is that a fork? Did you just lose a piece? Well, the answer is no. Stop the video. How does white get out of this without losing a piece? Okay. Did you find knight f6 check? That's all. As soon as the queen takes, you can just kind of move your bishop away. Now, in this position, I want to show you a cool idea. Let's say black plays the move bishop a6 here. Now, that looks a little funny, but this also introduces a concept that happens a lot in games. I'll put a highlight. You see that diagonal? That's when a bishop stops a king from castling. And that's like annoying. If I'm a king, I don't want this little bishop telling me what to do. But it really is telling the white king, look, you can't castle on the king side. That's a pretty good piece. If you want to block that, then you're going to have to deal with moves like c4, which, you know, might open the game up more or weaken your position. So, you know, white has to deal with that bishop. However, there's something in this position for white as well. See that square? That's right. What kind of a square is this? It's an outpost square. So even though black gets this beautiful bishop, white is going to get a nice square in the center of the board. And you'd have a very interesting game. But that's not what happened. Lasker puts the knight on e5 and tells black, I'm coming for your king. If you try to chase the knight away, you're going to get hit with that nice move, queen h5 check. And here, my friends, you could run into a whole bunch of tactics. If you try to chase the queen away with g6, then how about knight takes g6? Really, really strong move. Really strong move. You see the pressure the queen puts on that line? The bishop here protects that rook, but there's all sorts of tactics that could happen. Now, if you take my knight, I'm obviously not going to take your rook, but I am going to take this pawn. And it turns out the sacrifice is really strong because the queen now is hitting the bishop for a second time. You move your king, and the knight just takes with check, and all of a sudden, you know, this is, oof, not good for black. So let's go back. After knight e5, black castles, not chasing the knight out. He sees that check, and white develops and puts another piece toward the black king. What would you do? Bishop to d3. Beautiful move. Here comes bishop to e7. Now here a lot of players thought instead of bishop to b7, maybe you can just take that knight, get rid of it because it's pretty strong, and then if white takes back, again each side has something nice. For black you have the open f file, and for white you have a pawn pushed way up the board guarding two very important squares on black side. So white would get a little space, black would get a really nice open file for the rook. Okay, after bishop d3, Thomas just said, nope, I'll put my bishop on b7, and then comes a really, really deadly trap, queen h5. And here, queen h5 is setting the trap of knight takes bishop. And after knight takes bishop, which is a check, by the way, that's going to free this bishop to work with the queen and start mating threats on this square. Now, Thomas tried to stop it with queen e7. His thinking was the following. If you take my knight, check, then I just take with the g pawn, and you'll see why I put my queen on e7. See that? The queen is defending the pawn. However, he missed something. Stop your video and see how much you can calculate. White is going to checkmate black, forced in this position. And if I told you white is going to checkmate the black king on a certain square, would you be able to guess which one it is? Okay, look around. Which one? Do you think here, here, here? How about if I told you like maybe down here on g1? Can you imagine? How can this king go from here to here in this position? Well, keep your eyes open. Calculate. Well, the move is queen takes h7. Absolutely amazing. That's a whole queen. You have to take it. There's no other move. When you take the queen, however, you line your king up with this light squared bishop, and then you get hit with double check. And whenever there's a discovered double check, remember, the knight is moving, the bishop is checking the king. So is the knight. So the king has to move. If he goes up in the corner, bad news. Knight g6, checkmate. Ouchie. Not good. So you can't go in the corner, which means you're going to start your journey down the board. So let's go back. Here's the queen sacrifice. Beautiful move. King has to take. Knight takes f6, double check. King went to h6. The knight on e checked. And the reason he uses this knight is to guard this square here, forcing the king to the g5 square. Now he's getting closer to the bottom of the board. Can you imagine? This is all forced. Pawn h4. Check. You can't take the pawn because of the rook. You can't take the knight because of the knight. You can't take that knight because of the other knight. You can't come here because of the bishop. So where do you go? You have to come to f4. Now you get hit with g3. The king, where does he go? Has to go to f3. Now it turns out if you castle in this position here, there's really nothing you can do to stop bishop to e2 checkmate. But what Lasker did instead of castling here is he played bishop to e2 check. Do you see where that forces the king? He has to go to g2. Amazing. Rook h2 check, protected by the knight. What's the only move? King g1. Look at this. This is like, how is this possible? Well, there's checkmate in one move here, and there's two different ways to do it. I like this one the most. Castle. I hope you enjoyed this game. Fantastic chess. Study, study, study. Do your tactics. I'll see you in class.